Okay, so we're going to get started. Feels like it's been forever, just because I was gone this weekend. And then, of course, we did the update on what was going on in the world at large. So I wanted to kind of take a breath, and I'm going to let Liza and Bridget know we're doing the book review because I'm going to heavily criticize Liza, and I want her here when I do it. She's trying to give me a heart attack. I was just finishing up a long thread on an article that I had read, which was fascinating, basically just kind of reinforcing all the stuff that we've talked about on here at nauseum. And she sends me this post saying that our Congress had just introduced legislation that gave people that served in Israel's IDF some of the same benefits that veterans from the United States get. And of course, I could just feel my whole body go. So I'll be a little distracted tonight, and I'm going to blame Liza 100%. For doing that to me. She knows better than that. All right. So basically, I'm going to do a little bit of a review to let you know where we were at. We're in chapter 2 of, oh, Liza said that Bridget's moving cars because of a tornado warning. So she'll either be late or not here at all. So the first thing that we talked about in chapter 2, I want to do a little bit of review, was about what was going on in Italy and Andreotti, and then we moved on to a little bit about the Palm affair that had happened in Sweden, along with Anna Lend, who had been his protege. She also was assassinated in a completely weird murder. And then we talked a little bit about how they had used the Red Brigade and basically set them up whenever they wanted to do a domestic terror event. And then we kind of got into Della Chase, who had been operating kind of on the peripheral of, he was a general in Italy, and that he was involved in the P2, which is Propaganda Due, that was a Masonic Lodge order. And also how he interfaced with Gelli, Gelli, who also was part of he ended up being like the Grand Poobah of the P2 eventually. And how the whole Aldo Moro affair happened, where they had kidnapped him. They eventually kill him. And that was another one of those Operation Gladio events inside of Italy. And so basically, that's kind of where we got up to. And then the author starts talking about Magliana, Magliana. And supposedly it had began as an illegal settlement that had been populated by Sicilians pouring north in search of work. It was close to Tiber, Tiber, And by the 1960s, the district was controlled by basically mafia type cells. They were violent, ruthless. They were organized similar to Soviet cells, forced most of their rivals out of the city. The Pellegrino Commission of Inquiry established that Banda had a close relationship. That was part of the name, Banda della Magliano, a close relationship with Gladio. And there was another entity called the Nuclei Armate, basically revolutionary, NAR, and SISMI, which was an Italian intelligence entity. So they kind of all worked together in orchestrating Operation Gladio inside of Italy. So the bullets used to kill Piccarelli were of an unusual military caliber, 7.62 millimeter, which was manufactured by a French company out of Paris. This type of ammunition is commonly used by Marseille gangster clan, like the Corsican Mafia. It was also found after the murder of Piccarelli in a basement of the health ministry, which seems like a Gladio attack, but they also found in the basement of the health ministry an arms supply, like massive amounts of arms. And this isn't the only story that we will read where basically Gladio stashes of weaponry is found in government buildings. So Magliano had one significant advantage. It was scarcely a short distance from the location where Mauro's body was found. The famous Crisis Resolution Committee also included the SISMI director, General Santovito, another close acolyte of Gelli and a member of P2. So what you're going to recognize every time we talk about Italian Gladio, especially during this early time, is the association they have either with the Knights of Malta or the Masonic Lodge P2. Almost all of the leadership, if not all of the leadership, have that in common. Santovito's fingerprints were found on every event during the years of lead, and the Mauro affair was no exception. He was cynically nominated by Francesco Cosica to represent the Secret Services on the Crisis Committee. So that's kind of like putting Ford on the JFK. And who else did they put? Alan Dulles. Yeah, same thing. And seems to have come to the task with curious dispensation. So he mentioned almost in passing that of Francesco Fonti, Fonti, who was a prominent member of the Dragonetta. It's a apostrophe N Drangheta. That's the mafia family in Southeast Italy that was taken down in 2019 by the state of the country of Italy. So the Nostra Zeta. They informed him where Mauro was being held and by whom. Fonte named the Banda della Magliano. They had kidnapped Mauro and were holding him awaiting further orders. Fonte said that he knew this because of the relationship between the Dinastragetta the mafia, and the Banda, which was a Gladio cell. Santavito casually took the information to the crisis committee, where he was told to keep it to himself because the politicians had changed their mind. It was a classic example of a deception, according to the Italian officials. Through this whole hazy environment, it became very clear that Piccarelli had sound reason for predicting that the general that knew all of this was going to get assassinated, giving his knowledge of the Morrow affair. Indeed, 4 years later, in September 1982, General Dalla Cesesi and his wife were gunned down with machine guns while driving in the Sicilian capital of Palermo. There was a lot of people that died there during the years of lead. The general had recently been appointed to the new prefect on the Andreotti's personal orders to neuter the mafia. This was another example of the truth about Aldo Moro door being shut tightly. In March 1984, a gang impersonating the Red Brigades raided Brink's Secure Mark Safe Deposit Center in Rome. It was at the time the largest robbery in Italian history. The raiders stole $21.8 million in cash and valuable. But this was no Red Brigade operation. Remember, Gladio dresses up like other people. The heist was led by none other than Tony Ciccarelli. Together, that just sounds mafioso, doesn't it? Ciccarelli. Together with members of the Banda della Magliana and others who spoke with those accents. And just so that you guys know, Italians, based on where they're at in the country, have different slang terms and accents just like we do. Ciccarelli later told his wife, Chiara Osolo, that he was allowed to keep 20 billion lira from the haul, which means he basically was able to get rich off of this bank heist. The story of the Brink's Secure Mark hit belongs in a much wider context as it relates to financial scandals that was happening in Italy at the time. The Vatican in the mid-'80s, along with Italian banks, had I forgot my hat. You're not on camera, Liza. It doesn't matter. These are famously recalled by the body of a man called God's banker, Roberto Calvi. He was discovered, as we have already revealed in some of our other book reviews, hanging off of London's Blackfriar Bridge, June 1982. So he was a little heavy. They tied a rope around his neck, threw him off the bridge with stone, as in like Masonic marble stone in his pocket to make it known that it was a hit. Ciccarelli carefully removed highly sensitive confidential documents relating to Calvi's dealings with the Vatican private bank, the IOR, Pope John II, and Sicilian money launderer, Michele Sedona. So Michele Sedona was basically the financial advisor to the Vatican, for lack of a better way of explaining that. He kind of was the inside guy, where Calvi was the outside guy. Both were members of the P2 Lodge and very close to Gelli. So The robbery was a cover for a much wider conspiracy, which led to every Italian secret state and to the Gladio secret army. Ciccarelli had little time to have fun with his new wealth because in September 1984, he got shot dead. A day after supposedly forgetting a borsello that he left in a Roman taxicab. This little gift parcel contained incriminating evidence concerning the murders of Mino Piccarelli and Aldo Moro. It included 9 cartridges of an unusual French 7.62 millimeter gun, and that gun got traced to the murder of Piccarelli. Forged documents incriminating the Red Brigade, meaning they were set up, and medicine from Aldo Moro, all in this briefcase. That's weird. So while Tony Ciccarelli certainly knew the truth about Moro and Piccarelli's death, these things that were in there were instantly associated with him and led to him basically being eliminated for sloppy work. It's also possible, as many authors has pointed out, that that stuff that was found in that briefcase was actually planted there by some of these secret services to implicate him, knock him off, and then everybody else stops looking, because what we learned as one of our cliches after World War II is nobody looks for dead bodies. So you fake their death, and then nobody looks for him. So in this case, they can set someone up with false evidence, kill them, and then people stop digging because they think they have their murderer. Because it would be difficult to explain how somebody who's lived their life in the mafioso, that like him, would do something so crazy. So it does look like I'm kind of on the fence. I've read probably no less than 4 books that talk about this particular issue right here, and it's kind of divided as to who people which version they and they have good logic on both sides. I just don't know what's true, and I always want to make sure you guys know that I don't have an opinion on that, because I can see that either one of them would be credible. So then Andreotti, who is the guy in charge, he ends up being looked at because a lot of the evidence and the people and the associations begin in the Moro affair, begin pointing back at him. So there was a person that's referred to as Divine Julius, and he gets arraigned on a bunch of charges of murder. One of them was Mino Piccarelli. In 1993, the who's referred to as a mafia turncoat, his last name is Buscetta, Buscetta, told the Sicilian Mafia Commission that his boss, who was Don Gaetano Badalamenti, Badalamenti, rubbed out Piccarelli as a favor to Andreotti, who feared damaging new revelations concerning Aldo Moro. In 1999, Italians were stunned as the immortal Andreotti stood trial for mafia associations alongside Badalamenti. The going back and forth with the Italian justice system had just begun, and there was a film that was made in 2008 called Il Divo, I-L, and then a second word, D-I-V-O, which basically talks about Andreotti's crime and the mafia associations. So at one point in one of the trials, he was acquitted only to be pronounced guilty at the state's appeal later on, and was sentenced to prison. However, a year later, the sentences were removed, but the accusation of mafia ties continued to haunt him. He escaped a full-blown mob conviction in Sicily purely because of constitutional time limitations. And a Palermo court left the statement lying on the charge sheet that until 1980, Andreotti used the mob to further his political career in such an extent that it is considered that he was a component of the mafia as the actual leader of Italy. So by the time Mauro was killed, the leadership of the Red Brigade, who was obviously the thing that got accused of doing all of this crap all the time, realized during long hours of reflection that their ranks were riddled with traitors to the cause, meaning that the Operation Gladio people had actually infiltrated their group and were using them as stooges. So one of the Italian senators who wrote several different articles about the Mauro affair said that, let's see, Mario Moretti was one of the infiltrators. Moretti received 6 life sentences for the murder, but served only 15 years before he was paroled. In one of his works, this senator who wrote a whole bunch of stuff about all of this stressed the elimination of Mauro as a consequence of the converging of the Red Brigade and Italy's secret services, which, of course, as we have articulated throughout all of this, the terrorist organizations are set up by these same people to be infiltrated and used for their means. That's the whole reason they have them, is to control us. Many of the opposition, quote unquote opposition, like the Red Brigade, is set up for the same reason. So the author then moves on and talks about Vincenzo Vinciguerra, Vinciguerra. And he had explanations for the black years of Italian terrorism, and was imprisoned in 1972 for blowing up 3 Carabinieri officers in a booby trap car. The judge in that case, a judge that did the investigation into it, Casson, C-A-S-S-O-N, said that it was carried out with C4 explosives. At the time, the only place that you could get C4 explosives in all of Europe was NATO. So they found out that this particular explosive came from a NATO-supplied Gladio munitions cache hidden in the main city cemetery of Verona. Casson named the organization It's called Ordine Nuovo, which means new order. So I'll be referring to it as New Order. And this Visigaro belonged to the New Order. And the New Order is one of the elements of their Gladio program. It's referred to throughout all of the research that I've done. And they actually did some missions internationally. And they also work directly with the government in the form of the SISMI, which is basically their military intelligence. So together, they engineered murders that were carried out by not only Vincigaro, but then they would turn around and blame it on the Red Brigade, to which they would then arrest a lot of those people, and those people would rot in jail for years, and they would ruin their lives. And they had nothing to do with any of this. Then the author moves on and talks about Visigaro's association with some guy that makes every single one of these books, bar none, that has to do with Gladio, Yves Garin Sarat. So I'm sure I just butchered his name. Yves Garin, it's GUERIN-SERAC. He's the guy that set up the entire Portugal Operation Gladio program called Agenter Press. It was located in Lisbon. And he basically, if they needed propaganda or anything like that, fake passports, any of that stuff, that's the guy they went to have it done. Vincigaro recalled in his talk with a Guardian journalist, quote, "That is the Carabinieri, the Minister of Interior, the Customs Services, and the Military and Civilian Intelligence Services accepted the ideology, reasoning behind the attack," unquote. The explosion reverberated for years after the blowing up of those Carabinieri. Those were basically like their police, because it marked the beginning of a trail followed by bloodhound magistrate Cassone. And Cassone is basically the guy that Italy owes a eternal debt of gratitude for exposing Operation Gladio, and the rest of the world for that matter. Because if it hadn't been for him and his investigations, most of what we know today, we wouldn't know. And Cassone ended up with Andreotti exposure of Gladio. And that led to what you've heard me talk about routinely in most of these, is when Andreotti got up, because it gets re-exposed in 1990 in August, and then he gets up in November and he makes this address, and to all of basically Europe is who he's addressing, because between August and November, the ACC and CPC organizations in NATO had a planning meeting, which they did like once a quarter. And between August and that planning meeting, all of the other heads of state in Europe were all talking to their media saying, no, we don't know anything about Operation Gladio. We've never heard of it. We don't have stay behind units, blah, blah, blah. And Andreotti famously gets up in November and says, not only do you know about it, you were just at the meeting last October, and starts, identifying people. So he unequivocally knew, he unequivocally was in charge of it for Italy, and was so much aware of it that he knew who the other states were that were involved in it. So Visigaro's revealing comments to The Guardian included an electrifying information that he and his friends were subcontractors to, quote, these are his words, super organization, which, lacking a Soviet military invasion, which might not happen, took up the task on NATO's behalf of preventing a slip to the left in the political balance of the country. The terrorist line was followed by camouflaged people belonging to the security apparatus or those linked to the state apparatus through rapport or collaboration. I say every single outrage that followed from 1969 fitted into a single organized matrix, unquote. The matrix he's talking about is Operation Gladio. All domestic terror can be traced to Operation Gladio. Daniel Ganser pointed to the same strategy in his book, where he said that they used these groups to dupe the members of them into doing basically camouflage. Now, here's an interesting footnote, because I always read all of the references and I check them out to make sure that the book's legit. But I also read all the footnotes. Now, listen to this footnote. I have no idea why this is even in a footnote. It should have been in the main text, which is why you have to read the footnotes. A neo-fascist paramilitary grouping, meaning New Order, bearing blatant occult overtones. They're talking about the Ordine Nuovo, New Order. It was founded by Giuseppe Pino Rauti, R-A-U-T-I, who later ran an organization called Movimento Sociale Italiano. So basically like a social Italian movement. A party chiefly dedicated to the flame of Mussolini. Not fascist at all. Detractors debunked the initials as standing for Mussolini, you are immortal. In 1961, Ratti gave a lecture at the U.S. Marine College in Annapolis on techniques and possibilities of a coup in Europe. And the U.S. Marine College in Annapolis is actually the Marine Corps, of which the Navy, which the Marine Corps goes to as well. Techniques and possibilities of a coup in Europe. That was his subject. And they got the right guy. I think this has been in our face the entire time, and we just didn't recognize it, honestly. It just keeps hitting us over the head. So, in relationship to Danielle Gansler's book, he talks about the smoke and mirrors game, that it includes psyops and planting informers and creating terrorist plans. And once you have all of that set up, then you just let the event unfold and you end up with a Gladio operation. But trust me, they're very planned. In 2004, they refer to them as right-wing. They are not, and I'm just going to call them fascist, government of Silvio Berlusconi, Berlusconi, showed the signs of toppling fractional infighting and scoring poorly in European elections. So the anti-terrorist squad was directed to a huge weapons cache found at an apartment in a posh district of Rome. Ownership was immediately attributed, without any evidence, to a reconstituted faction of the Red Brigade, because it didn't even really exist at that point. But here there were several hundred kilograms of explosives, mint condition detonators, and hand grenades, and carabinieri uniforms, a small machine gun, several, equipment to make false ID cards. And then part of the story required headlines to be written. The facts are that the flat was actually one of a clutch in the same block used by espionage agencies with several off the radar tasks, such as massive wiretapping of local journalists, politicians, and businessmen. In other words, it is in the heart of their spy area. It'd be like putting something next to the CIA and like a huge weapon cache and go, yeah, no, they wouldn't know anything about it. Hello? Well, they would if they were doing their job. So, they have a politician by the name of the actual president guy, the Berlusconi. So he's basically new and was in the P2 Jelly's who of the fascist element in the Italian government. And evidently, they even had ID cards with numbers, not like that's Hitler or anything at all, because, you know, the SS, oh, that's right, they had numbers too. So this Berlusconi guy had a membership card of Jelly's organization. The number 1816 was found on a list because when they raid, eventually they get around to raiding Jelly's house, and then they find an alternate list in Jelly's daughter's suitcase that has a false bottom, because who doesn't have a false bottom in a suitcase when they're traveling out of Rome? They find a second list of the P2 membership. So they got them coming and going as far as the IDs of all of these people that are part of this Operation Gladio. And that's the reason why eventually the entire apparatus takes on the persona of Operation Gladio, because that was the Italian version of it. But they're the ones that kind of broke the code on how it was all set up, because it all gets exposed. It's ties to the Masonic Lodge, which I would not doubt is true everywhere. And you have operations like Minneapolis, which of course those guys were all lodge members. And it's quite possible that that's a very common association, but most people don't know about this organization or this operation or anything else to have done the legwork to be able to tie all those pieces together. The only one that we know the most about is Italy, because the state did the investigation, or Casson, the guy that was the major prosecutor during that time. So Berlusconi claimed to be a man of action and compared himself, or people compared him to Mussolini. Both men showed no understanding of the limits to what they were allowed to do. Both said they worked long hours and paid attention to precision and detail, and both hated criticism, and both believed that the world was divided into friends and enemies. And if you're not with us, you're against us. So in November 2011, Berlusconi finally discovered that his numerous enemies far outnumbered his friends. He basically, his premiership was facing collapse in the space of a single weekend, because in December 2011, and I mean, that's just like yesterday, the accustomed calm of Florence, Italy's treasured capital of arts, was shattered by the murder of two Senegalese from Senegal street vendors. A man named as the alleged supporter of a fascist organization was Gianluca Casseri, Casseri, who was 50, shot both men, injured three more, then killed himself. When cornered by police in the car park, The supposed far-right connections of the assassin were vague. His sin, if any, deems to be that he flirted with a band who kept the flame of Mussolini alive, called Casa Pound or Pound House in Rome. And there was an American poet that that it was named after called Ezra Pound, who had died in Venice in 1957. So that's where it got its name. He also was a advocate of Mussolini. So the British newspapers became very excited over Caseri's job at the magazine, specializing in horror and fantasy stories. This is only important as a component of the posthumous character profiling typically associated with the custom patsy or stooge, steered by his minders to commit some act of violence. He certainly took the usual permanent exit. If Casari did commit suicide or he was shot by police is unresolved. There's a lot of suspicious things around his quote unquote suicide. By any standards, the strategy of tension, the outrage directed, and the attention yet again at Italy's mass immigration, chiefly from Africa, set the stage for much of the chaos that had controlled Italy's politics during this time period in 2011, so they could ensure that they get the right guy in there and not somebody that's against NATO. In March 2012, there was that's when you had Greece that was popping off at the time, and they had exposed a coup plot called Pleiades, Pythias. The plan had dated back to 2008. It was designed like NATO's Operation Prometheus, which installed the military government that we just talked about in 1967 with Colonel Papadopoulos, to overthrow a civilian government judged altogether too friendly with the Soviet Union. Both Pythias and whatever the other one is, were Greek mythology characters that identified themselves as true friendship, like their partners. So it wasn't coincidence that the one in 1967 that NATO did was named one of the friends in Greek mythology, and the associated current one in 2012, oddly enough, is named after the other twin or friend in Greek mythology. Huh. Probably just another coincidence. So the author goes, and it's just fortuitous this comes up in the book tonight, because we just went through the fact that you had in France, the government of the conservative New Democracy leader, Constantine Karamanlis, was the intended target to be shot and killed. He would have been deposed / killed. His sins lay in the warm relationships that he was cultivating between Athens and Moscow, and his intention to grant Russia leeway in the South Stream gas pipeline. That they were wanting to put across Greek territory to rival the US-backed Nabucco scheme. The exposure of this coup was traced to the ex-premier, the Secret Service, and supposedly unnamed Russian sources, who remained strangely quiet for 4 years until the great austerity crisis struck the country. Um, so obviously it was NATO and the US that was behind it. And then you had other instances, one of which he sets up, because what he's trying to do is show kind of this running strategy of tension. So he then transitions to an attack in Belgium on a mosque that was not only the mosque was attacked and people in it, but it was also burnt down, supposedly in a squabble between Sunni and Shia Muslims in Belgium. And then it talks about Belgium having imported 500,000 Muslims and keeping them like second class citizens. So you make sure that there's turmoil wherever they're at. And then, of course, it talks about France and the fact that there was a gunman that killed a rabbi that was on a scooter, his 2 children, outside of a Jewish school, and the fact that Nicolas Sarkozy had put all of this rhetoric out about the minority populations in Europe, and basically all of this is leading up to, in case you hadn't guessed, the switching from the communists are the boogeymans to the radical Islamists. And that's what the author is trying to show you, how in fact they did that. So that's kind of the end of this chapter. And it's probably a good place to stop since we've been at it for almost an hour. And the next one is a very interesting one as well, which we will continue on Thursday. But that did a nice job of kind of refreshing our memory, since it's been a while since we did a Gladio book specifically, from how the Italian Gladio unfolded and the primary movers and shakers in it, and how it went from a strict focus on, oh my God, we have to do all these terror events because if we don't, we're going to lose democracy and the communists are going to invade any minute. So of course, that's all garbage. You don't destroy democracy to save democracy, because that's kind of what they were doing. Not kind of, that's exactly what they were doing. And as a result of that, once in the early 1990s, when the Soviet Union fell, they're like, we got to have a new boogeyman. So immediately you have these mass immigration. So first of all, they had to create terror and strategy of tension in a lot of the minority countries, Africa. So they gin up business and migration moves into Europe so that they can change the narrative from, oh my gosh, the communists are bad, because we've got all of these communist organizations that we've been talking about forever, and now they're no good for us because there's no longer the Soviet Union. So we got to throw the whole communist thing, and China's not communist enough yet, and they're not big enough and powerful enough. So we still have to invest over there to give them all of our technology so they can become the new communist threat, which is where we're at now. But in that, they had to fill the gap, and how they felt the gap was with radical Islamists, because there always has to be a boogeyman, in case you haven't figured that out yet. So the boogeyman in the interim was radical Islamists, but you have to create them. They just don't fall out of the air. Well, how are we going to create radical Islamists? Well, we're going to mess up all their countries. We're going to invade Afghanistan. We're going to screw up Syria. And oh, by the way, Israel's our partner in all of this. All they have to do is look at somebody cross-eyed, and they're taking some of their territory and pissing off another country, whether it's Jordan or Egypt or whatever. So if you need anybody poked to create radical Islam, bad guys, massage your buddy. You're going to call them. They're going to create a terror attack either on themselves or someone in the neighborhood. and then bullets are going to fly. There's going to be people displaced. And where does all those people that get displaced go? Oh, to Europe and the United States to destabilize us. It's this vicious cycle. And there's always going to be a boogeyman for them to blame, which is why I'm not a communist sympathizer, and I don't know what's going on in China. But I honestly don't believe anything that our government tells us. And if they tell me somebody is a boogeyman, my honest assessment is they're probably not. Because that's been the going uh, model since the turn of the century, since the late 1800s. Everybody that they have said is a boogeyman was not a boogeyman. Okay. So I'm skeptical, and that's where we're going to leave it. So I'm going to go back. I can see SR71. He's like on a tear tonight. He is our official greeter on our Rumble channel. God bless him and Donnie Vision both. Totally off topic, but I have 100 turkeys ready to give away tomorrow. I don't even want to know about that, Donnie Vision. Let's see what else we got. Happy to have you. So Mitch Steinkock, welcome to the show. We've got HSJ. Now, y'all are as bad as these books with these names. Please, where's my Toms and Johns and holy. All right. So, is any of our overseas friends here tonight? Liza and I were just tickled to death. We got invited today to Swedish Spaces, and the people in there, very intelligent, nice as can be. Because we have covered so much information, they actually thought we had contacts in Sweden, that we were getting our information from insiders inside of these countries. So big pat on the back to Liza and Bridget and myself for digging out the research and having it recognized internationally by people that live in these countries, that we're actually telling the truth about things that are happening or has happened in their countries. So that was awesome. Okay. SR71, 06 for Colonel. You're absolutely right. 07 is a Brigadier General. That's true. I actually think that's some kind of a salute, like a hand salute. SR71, he's serious. So not unless you're buying dinner. All right, no hooking up here, Liza girl. Just kidding. Dead men don't talk. That's absolutely right. C4 is NATO. And international expansionism. I wonder if it's if y'all have not read the link that the thread that I just posted on X a little bit ago about Mark Twain, I found it completely fascinating. So I had to share it. There was a lot of the same information. So I just want y'all to know that you're not wasting your time, but I did share it for anybody that was new, and how it tied to the anti-imperialist, of which Mark Twain was a very outspoken supporter of anti-imperialist. He did not believe we should be doing what we were doing and coercing other countries to our will. And I definitely have to go back and look up. He talked about a law that passed by was more like a treaty that passed by one vote, and that it got appealed all the way to the Supreme Court, and there it won by one as well. And I definitely want to go back and look into that, because I think that would be very interesting to see who it was that committed us to this long string of conquest through the world. Marine Corps and Navy go to Annapolis. Graduates get to choose which branch of service. And that's fairly true across the board with all the service. Obviously, if you're going to go to the Navy Academy, you can actually even choose to go in the Air Force. I don't know if most people knew that, but you can. They generally don't. But there has been a few people that do that. Best noise canceling earbud. Oh, that's interesting, Hazel. Thank you for that. I have a pair of the Apple ones, but for some reason, no matter which tip I use, my ears are like getting that crap out of they just won't stay in my ears. So I may have to try the Vecora. SR71. We have a troll. Who's the troll? Who are you guys saying is the troll? So, interesting side note, there was a time, can't speak to current day, when Berlusconi owned most of the Italian media. That's interesting. I did not know that. Thank you, Sicalabro, for letting us know that. Who else we got? Rosie's in the house. They always want to show off their education in liberal arts. All right, let's see what else we got. Sally joined us. Thank you for being here, Sally. The plebes are educated. Give the Colonel a thumbs up. Yes, please do that. Please follow our channel. Oh my gosh. So we're almost up to 3,000 followers, 2.93. So if you guys can go and share some of our podcasts over on X and Truth Social, I'd really appreciate it so that we can get that number up. We are getting really good responses to these shows and the book reviews that we have been doing. So again, I really appreciate it. So are you saying this Aurora, the earbug thing is a troll? That's interesting. So now we're getting people that want to advertise on our show. I guess I should take that as a compliment, but probably need to catch people doing that. Come next week. I'm out for 2 weeks vacation, traveling with my granddaughter. Time for her to see the U.S. on a road trip. Oh, God bless you, SR71. Well, hopefully you can listen in a little bit while you're doing that. I'm still waiting on my first granddaughter. He or she will be here in July. So very excited about that. She just got her learner's permit. Oh, God bless you. We did a road trip the year my middle daughter got her learner's permit. She was driving out in Wyoming. We drove all the way to California from Florida to visit my aunt and my uncle. And thank God I did that because the next year my uncle had passed away. So that was 2009. And that was very interesting because my daughter got to drive in all of these different states when she was 15 years old and thought it was just totally awesome. It's a road trip that they have never forgotten. So have fun, SR71, on your trip, and God bless you. You'll be in our prayers to be safe. JB, currently Oconus, enjoying the shows, mostly on replay. Well, thank you for being here live. I appreciate it. SR, can you tell me the days and times? Okay, so we are on, yeah, look at you. He's got it. Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. And then we do one at noon Eastern time on X exclusively. So we do book reviews on Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday night. And the current book that we're doing is Gladio, NATO's Dagger at the Heart of Europe, obviously, because we're here tonight. But what we're doing a little differently on X is we're going country by country and kind of doing it region by region. I kind of went out of turn today because I wanted to show a similarity to what we were studying in Central and South America. We'll be back there tomorrow. But I just think it's fascinating with that fresh in our memory. If I pop over to another geographical location where you can see the exact same thing going on. It just shows you the consistency behind these things. Number one, it's not random. Number two, the same people are behind all of them because there's so much commonality between them. Let's see. Berlusconi was a bunga scandal prime minister. He had connections to the mafia, totally pro-NATO guy. Thank you for adding that. I'm not even going to try to pronounce De Gasperi. Yes, they will get worse. Oh, as far as the advertisements in here, yeah, we'll probably have to delegate responsibility for somebody that can block those as we go through, because obviously I don't pay a lot of attention to the chat until afterwards, because it kind of breaks your thought up. It makes it really difficult. Have taken all of my grandkids on a road trip when they got their learner's permit. Oh, that makes me so happy. That's so awesome. What a great tradition. And you know that they're going to remember that for the rest of their life. You're obviously a great grandpa. Okay, but I'm banned on X, darn it. Yeah, so Rosie, you bring up a good point. So I probably need to figure out a way, and I do have my daughter who can download video files and then upload them on our Rumble channel. So I probably need to get her on that and have her start doing that. One of the guys over on X was kind enough today to begin like a log sheet of a post that I can pin on my profile that has like the library of all of those video files. So I can get her tuned into that and then have her start downloading them and bringing them over to Rumble. That's an excellent idea. So thanks, Rosie, for bringing that up. And we also have a YouTube. All of this stuff goes over to YouTube. I don't promote the YouTube channel at all because I don't really care. I just want, if somebody's ever on there searching for Operation Gladio, I want our stuff to show up. And I'll have her upload those too. The good thing about that one is that you can do playlist, and she can put them under a subcategory where you would see like that one called X specific country will come up with a list of it. And there you go. Look at you, SR71. Thank you for sharing that. He just shared the link to the guy who did the summary post of all of our noon spaces. So we'll come up with a jazzy name, Gladio 101 around the world. I like that. And then we will post that over on YouTube as its own playlist. So you can just start at the top and you'll be going around the world with all the Gladio operations. And I'll ask my daughter to start on that as soon as we get off here tonight. So anyway, so now I don't even have to go look up the link because SR71 just gave it to me. So I'm going to copy it and send it to my daughter. So anyway, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for all of your comments. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you all being on the X at noon as well and learning all of this stuff together. And with that, I'm going to sign off. I will, we may be doing a show tomorrow night with Hamster, War Hamster. If we do, it's going to be, let me check my time. It's going to be tomorrow night at 9:30 if we do it. It will be streaming on Rumble at the very least. We'll try to get it on some other platforms. And I just got an invite. So tomorrow night also, oh shoot. So I'll be live tomorrow at 9:30, but we're recording Alpha Warriors weekly show tomorrow morning, and it will also be streaming at 9 o'clock tomorrow night. So I'm going to be on competing channels. That's just crazy. And speaking of Alpha Warrior, make sure you're following him and watching his show, because he has some really good guests on there. Him and CanCon invited me on their Thursday night show at 9 o'clock called Sit Rep. I've been on there twice. I know some of you joined us on that show, but we're going to be talking about what Liza and Bridget and I talked about the other night about the current events happening that are all Gladio related. So the three of us are going to chit chat about that for a little bit. So anyway, there you have it. Thank you again for being here, and I will see you soon.